Now, before the death of the Queen, Princess Anne sat down with Chris Shipp, the ITV royal editor and Sunrise contributor.
Now, it was filmed in 2017.
It began, as many royal stories do, with stillness. A shiver settled over Balmoral Castle as word spread that King Charles III had taken a dramatic turn. The 76-year-old monarch, who had endured controversy, resistance, and global censure, was now confronted with the one factor that no king can outmaneuver: time. The doctors arrived in unmarked automobiles. Senior royals were summoned privately. The public, gazing through blurry camera lenses and tabloid speculation, waited. However, something unexpected occurred behind the ancient stone walls, not in the format of a speech, not in a formal proclamation, but in a late-night whispered chat between the king and Princess Anne, whom he had always trusted more than anybody else. She was the last person who left his room. She emerged pale, calm, and silent. For weeks, she said nothing. The world mourned. The family carried out their tasks. William stepped up. Harry remained in California. Camilla, as queen consort, appeared to be pulling more strings than ever, until now. Because at 74, Princess Anne has finally broken her silence. And what she revealed, Charles's dying wish, surprised even the most seasoned royal observers. In a private family meeting at Windsor, away from photographers and aides, Anne reached into a secured document case and took out a single folded note. Charles' handwriting is evident. The ink faded along the corners. No signature, no crest. Only 7 lines of truth would permanently split his family. Tell them I only trust William. Keep Camilla out of succession, and don't let Harry back in. The crown isn't a game. I have made my peace. And do what I can't. Choose duty, not blood. The room apparently went silent. William stared at the note without blinking. Harry, who had only arrived a few days before, went crimson with rage. Camilla, up, said nothing, and walked out of the room. For the first time, the crown had spoken beyond death, and Anne, ever the faithful and neglected, had been chosen as its voice. The monarchy was shaken by a final decision made by a dying king that forever altered the balance of power between duty and blood, rather than a scandal or cover-up. This is the secret account of King Charles' deathbed wish, and how Princess Anne's 7 lines of truth altered the monarchy's destiny. King Charles III's dying days were marked by a curious mix of dignity and uneasiness. There was no dramatic collapse or public spectacle, only a quiet fading behind the closed curtains of Balmoral Castle, the same fortress where his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had died. At first, the palace attempted to manage the optics. The king's strength had been fading for months, with whispered rumors of weight loss, memory lapses, and sudden fatigue circulating within the walls of Buckingham for some time. However, it wasn't until he began canceling engagements, something Charles had always disliked doing, that the alarm bells rang. Official statements described a routine medical observation, but insiders knew the truth was far more sobering. The doctors were summoned secretly. Scotland provided solitude, tradition, and seclusion. And when the king's health deteriorated, the monarchy silently entered crisis mode. It began with William and Kate. According to sources, Charles had a long, private meeting with William, no advisors, note-takers, or Camilla, while their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were kept largely away from their grandfather's chambers, shielded by their mother's gentle hand and William's growing sense of responsibility. He looked him in the eye, a source said, and said, "You are ready, but not everyone will want you to be." Harry wasn't summoned at first. That detail alone raised concerns inside the family. After all, a monarch's final moments are intended to unite families. But Charles waited, maybe thinking Harry would arrive on his own. He didn't. It wasn't until Princess Anne made a discreet phone call to Montecito that Harry consented to return. "Your father is dying," she reportedly stated. "Don't let silence be your legacy." When Harry arrived, Meghan did not accompany him. Whether this was her decision or the palace's, it is unknown. He was assigned a chamber at the far end of the estate, respectful but aloof. In the meantime, Queen Camilla never left Charles's side. She hovered, protective, controlling, ever calculating, and reportedly tried to restrict access, especially as the king began to drift in and out of lucidity. Some aides claim she even intercepted messages from the Privy Council and Charles's own siblings, but she could not keep Anne out. Unlike Camilla, who sought to manage the crown through relationships and appearances, Anne lived by one rule: duty first. Charles knew that she was the only one who would not bend the truth for power or peace. On the final evening, long after most had gone to their apartments and the halls had quieted, Charles reportedly requested Anne. They spoke for about 40 minutes. There are no attendants or doctors, only the king and his sister. What they spoke between themselves remained private, until now. When Anne emerged, she appeared deliberate, not shaken. She walked the length of the hall, went to her apartments, and locked a small folded note inside her personal case, without speaking to William or Harry or stopping to explain. The next morning, Charles was gone. The palace verified it in the traditional way: stoic rhetoric, black banners, and an image of the king in uniform. Tributes flowed in. Politicians gave speeches. Global leaders expressed condolences. Behind it all, the royal family began a new chapter of managed sadness. However, the atmosphere inside the castle had changed. Harry reportedly became irritated because he was not notified of Charles's exact moment of death, was not included in multiple briefings, and when he approached Anne after the funeral procession, she merely gave him a nod. No words, no invitation. William, meanwhile, became quieter and more concentrated. The weight of the crown had been passed, not only symbolically, but strategically. The monarchy had begun to realign, and the first seismic breach had already shown, because a final directive was hidden deep in Anne's personal paperwork, protected by a lock and key. A secret wish. Charles made an unexpected decision. Eventually, everyone would hear it. It happened silently, with no reporters, cameras, or public announcements. Just a closed-door meeting at Windsor Castle, 10 days after King Charles III's formal funeral. The royal family had assembled for what officials characterized as a private consolidation, a chance to review the transfer, reassess tasks, and secure the crown's stability. But Princess Anne had arrived with a different reason. She entered the room with her typical unshakable posture, shoulders squared, voice quiet, expression unreadable. The conference was attended by top royals, Prince William and Princess Kate, Prince Harry, who is remaining in the UK on a short extension, Camilla, and 2 members of the late king's inner council. What Anne did next would alter everything. She placed a little aged letter on the table. The royal seal had been broken, and the writing was faded, written in Charles's hand, deliberate, sharp, and unmistakable. Anne took a deep breath and said, "These were his final instructions. I was told to wait until after the ceremonies, until we were all here, until the noise had passed." Anne read the contents aloud. 7 lines, no flourishes, no puzzles, just the undeniable clarity of a dying ruler who had spent his life managing a fractured family and an ancient institution. "Tell them that I trust William, only William. Keep Camilla out of succession and don't let Harry back in. The crown isn't a game. I have made my peace. Anne, do what I can't. Choose duty, not blood." The air thickened. Kate reportedly looked down, tears welling up, and William sat transfixed, staring at the note as if it were 1,000 pounds. But Harry arose, his voice cracking. "He said that. That's not possible. He wouldn't have written that." not about me." Anne returned his stare, steady yet mournful. "He did, Harry. I was there. He said it twice, and he asked me to carry it forward, no matter the consequences." Harry's hands trembled, and Camilla, red-faced and plainly surprised, murmured something under her breath before leaving the room. In those 7 sentences, Charles had drawn a line that no one else had dared to. He had identified his successor not just in blood, but also in heart. The words struck a chord with both Harry and William. He had chosen William to safeguard the monarchy and warned against those he saw as threatening it, even from within. According to some insiders, Anne paused before sharing the note, torn between devotion to her brother and loyalty to the institution. But duty ultimately won out, as it usually did with her. "This is not about punishing anyone," she added calmly. "It's about preserving something bigger than us. He knew what was coming, and he made a decision. I'm simply honoring it." Anne returned the note to her case. There was no vote, no further debate, and the meeting came to a deafening quiet. However, the repercussions were immediate. William's power grew unshakable. Camilla's goals were muted, and Harry, possibly for the first time, realized he hadn't merely left the institution. He'd been locked out, forever, because now the monarch's final wish had been expressed. It was irreversible. When Princess Anne folded the note and returned it to her case, the atmosphere in the Windsor chamber changed from tense to flammable. The implications of Charles's final words were not only personal, but also damning. Prince Harry stood still for a beat, his jaw clenched and his face flushed with disbelief, while the rest of the family sat in uncomfortable silence. Even William, who had spent years learning to maintain a stoic front under pressure, appeared uneasy. And Harry couldn't keep quiet. "He betrayed me," he mumbled. "He betrayed me, even in death." The words fell like a blow in the belly, and his voice cracked, not with weakness, but with the weight of 1,000 unspoken grievances, decades of feeling like a spare, years of humiliation, rejection, and watching his family, particularly his father, choose silence over support. What bothered Harry the most was the wording, "Do not let Harry back in." Not Harry must find his path, not protect him from the press. There was no indication of fatherly care. It was chilly and final. A gate slammed shut. "He let them freeze me out," Harry continued, facing William. "You know he did. And now this note, it's the final nail, isn't it?" William did not respond. Kate allegedly placed a gentle hand on her husband's knee, suggesting calm. Nevertheless, Harry was not searching for a fight. Rather, he was spilling a wound that had been festering for years. He turned to face Anne. "Why didn't you tell me? Why wait until now?" Anne, composed as ever, responded with her signature steel. "Because that was his wish. You had your chance to speak with him. You delayed. And when you arrived, he was already gone. This wasn't mine to alter. It was his to declare." That simply appeared to exacerbate the blow. According to sources close to the family, Harry retreated deeper into seclusion in the days following the encounter, refusing official engagements and skipping a private dinner with William and other senior royals. Despite Meghan's absence in the UK, her impact was felt strongly. Back in California, Meghan made no public statements, but a source close to her released a scathing reprimand to the American press. They manipulated a dying man. Charles was under pressure, isolated, and desperate for legacy approval. This wasn't his heart speaking. It was the firm protecting itself. The allegation that the royal institution had engineered Charles's final speech infuriated the palace even more. Senior aides refuted the claim outright. One source noted, "Charles may have been frail at the end, but he was not confused. If anything, he was crystal clear for the first time in years." Many people forget that this wasn't just about Harry the son. It was about Harry the symbol. To Charles, Harry had walked away from responsibility. He had written books. given interviews and caused the monarchy to bleed through 1,000 paper cuts. Now, facing death, Charles took the decision that no father wants to make. He isolated the family from the institution. "He chose the crown over his child," remarked one Sky News panelist. "And in doing so, he may have preserved the monarchy, but shattered what little bond was left." Harry has not returned to Windsor since. He came looking for closure. He received permanent banishment, not through a controversy, not by reasoning, but by 7 lines of ink from a father who had finally ceased pretending that things could ever be the same as before. And for Harry, that was the ultimate betrayal. While the populace mourned King Charles's death with tributes, parades, and constant media coverage, something far more important was happening within palace walls. Prince William was not crowned at a lavish ceremony. There were no gold carriages, choirs, or balcony waves. Instead, he rose like a shadow, solidifying, not with spectacle, but with conviction. According to senior insiders, when Princess Anne disclosed Charles's ultimate request, a silent but irrevocable shift occurred. There was no need for argument. The monarchy had made its decision, and William, ever the quiet heir, assumed charge as if he had been preparing his entire life. "It wasn't dramatic," one royal aide explained. "It was calm, efficient, and frankly terrifying in its clarity." William became the center of the institution overnight. Roles were immediately reallocated. William's private secretary was promoted to directly coordinate with senior government officials. His security detail was doubled, and he was moved into the late Queen's strategy quarters, a space previously reserved only for reigning monarchs. Most tellingly, his signature began appearing on documents typically handled by the sovereign. No remark was issued to the press. The official version maintained that William was only supporting the transition. Nevertheless, everyone knew the truth. Charles had given him the keys to the kingdom before his heart even stopped beating. And not everyone received it kindly. Queen Camilla was reportedly furious. According to sources, she had hoped for a more important role during the transitional period, potentially even a formal place on the Regency Advisory Council. However, once the message from Charles was revealed, "Keep Camilla clear of succession," her influence fell. Anne was apparently prevented from attending some internal briefings, and invitations to joint appearances with William and Kate stopped receiving. When she questioned the changes, Anne supposedly responded, "Your place was beside the king. The king is gone." It was violent, icy, and final. However, the machine kept moving. Behind closed doors at Clarence House and Buckingham Palace, operations shifted into post-Charles protocol. Staff were reassigned, William's direct reports were ordered to bypass old chains of command, and legal advisors began drafting succession contingency plans, not for the distant future, but for the present. One of the most symbolic moments came days later, when William and Kate entered a small ceremony inside St. George's Chapel, closed to the press and open only to the core family, where William received the sovereign signet ring, a token rarely passed outside of formal coronations. Princess Anne stood silently nearby. "It was the quietest coronation in royal memory," one insider stated. But make no mistake, it was a coronation. William didn't say much that day. He simply accepted the ring, nodded to his aunt, and hugged Kate. George, observing from the sidelines, reportedly murmured, "Are you king now?" William said softly, "Not yet, but I'm ready." Perhaps it is what was most important. This was not about announcements, gold thrones, or official pictures. It was about power, and William possessed it from then on. Not because he demanded it, not because he seized it. However, it was given to him by his father alone. The monarchy has chosen its future based on trust rather than noise. And William, formed by years of silence, duty, and constraint, rose like the tide, slowly, inexorably, unstoppable. The crown had not moved, but the authority had. The disclosure of King Charles's final wish did not last long within the palace gates. Within days of the private Windsor meeting, leaks flooded headlines across Britain and the Commonwealth, confirming what had long been whispered. Princess Anne had sent a message from beyond the grave that had forever altered the monarchy. While many expected indignation, scandal, or misunderstanding from the people, what happened next was far more powerful. Respect. The British people not only accepted Anne's involvement in revealing the late king's desires, but they complimented her for it. In a world of spin doctors, public relations teams, and carefully scripted royal appearances, Anne was regarded as the last of a dying breed, a royal who did not play games. "She's never cared for fame or favor," one BBC analyst said. "She's done the work, quietly, relentlessly, for decades. If Anne says Charles wrote it, the country believes her." The hashtag #HashTrustAnne trended on social media for 3 days in a row, and editorials in The Times, The Telegraph, and even The Guardian praised the Princess Royal in a rare show of unity. Meanwhile, William's public favor ratings rose, with polls showing a 15% increase in support for the Prince of Wales, and many Britons pushing for a faster ceremonial turnover of power. As one caller on LBC put it, "We've spent too long waiting for the future. William is the future, and Anne, God bless her, just cleared the path." However, not everyone was celebrating. Pro-Sussex media outlets in the US and abroad framed the revelation as a calculated move by the firm to isolate Harry permanently. A widely circulated piece from a California-based news blog even accused Anne of stage managing Charles's legacy to erase dissent. Meghan's supporters doubled down, claiming that Harry's emotional reaction had been weaponized against him. However, in the United Kingdom, those tales gained little traction. The British public, for the most part, had had enough of the drama. Anne's raw approach, free of self-pity and flair, cut through the clamor. She didn't weep for the cameras, and she didn't position herself as the crowned savior. She just performed what she had always done. She followed orders. Even royal detractors recognized that the Princess Royal handled the situation with uncommon and laudable calm, with Piers Morgan calling it the most honest moment the monarchy has had in years. A Guardian op-ed, while skeptical of royal power in general, admitted, "If one must inherit power, let it be handed down by someone who has earned the nation's trust, not through status but through service. That's Anne." In Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, media sources aired stories about Anne's lifelong dedication to public service, her thousands of engagements, reluctance to accept titles for her children, and frank honesty. Even in Scotland, where Republican sentiment had been increasing, Anne's name was mentioned with remarkable veneration. "She's a straight shooter," stated one Scottish commentator. "And if the monarchy survives, it'll be because of people like her, not because of crowns and castles." Within weeks, the palace's internal confidence had transformed. The Sussex camp had gone quiet. Camilla had retired from the public glare, and William and Kate, now taking on more visible leadership positions, did so with the full support of the people. And it was all down to one woman, the woman the monarchy often forgot, sometimes neglected, but who had recently reminded the world, "You do not need a throne to talk with power. You need the truth." And Anne possessed it, in her voice, her hands, and 7 lines of ink from a dying king. It was heard across the nation. They believed her. King Charles III may have left quietly, but his final act said volumes. In just 7 lines, scrawled in fading ink and presented by the sister he trusted the most, Charles did what no monarch before him had dared. He violated convention to preserve the future. In choosing William as the sole heir to power and explicitly warning against Harry's return, Charles rewrote not only a family dynamic, but also the path of the monarchy itself. He did not soften the truth for the sake of appearances. and he chose clarity over comfort, fully aware of the emotional devastation it would cause. And Princess Anne? She was the vessel, the final executor of a dying king's will. For decades, she stood just outside the spotlight, quietly holding up the institution while others grabbed headlines. But in the end, Anne delivered the crown's truest moment of honesty, without tears, theatrics, or favoritism. William is now at the helm, not crowned, but confirmed. Not by public adoration or decades of procedure, but by the man who nurtured him, ruled before him, and eventually selected him. Though he did not seek for that final blessing, he took it with the gravity of a man who realizes its significance. Harry, meanwhile, drifts deeper into the distance, not by decree, but by decision. Not punished, but no longer welcomed. He may stay a prince in title, but not on purpose. And that is a truth he may never accept. Camilla was hushed. Meghan was enraged. But the crown? It's more stable than it has been in years. Because in that room at Windsor, history began with a whisper, a single sheet of paper, a dying breath, and the voice of a princess who prioritized duty above all else. This is Charles's legacy, not in pageantry or reform, but in clarity. And now it's William's future, carried not under the shadow of his father's rule, but with the light of one final truth. The monarchy didn't simply weather the storm. It reappeared, realigned, resolved, and prepared.